Gathering things to his mistress, her husband cynically said, "I will today calculate the approximate cost of all the—" Alexander methodically stacked his things in his suitcase. On the floor lay shirts, jeans and expensive perfume, which Maria gave him on their 5-year anniversary. He did it without haste, as if savoring the moment. Maria stood behind him, her hands trembling and her face expressing a mixture of shock and despair. "So, where's my leather jacket? Its value should clearly be on the list of what I spent on this house," Alexander tossed over his shoulder with a cynical chuckle. Maria couldn't take it anymore. "Are you seriously talking about this now? You're going off to a mistress, leaving your family, and you're thinking about things?" Alexander looked up at her with a look full of boredom and contempt. "Maria, let's not be dramatic. You knew this was going to happen. I deserve better than to be tied to this." He looked around the room full of memories like it was just a box of trash. To what? To the family? To a wife? To a child? Her voice was shaky, but there was a growing anger in it. Family, wife. That's all well and good, Maria. But you can see it's not working. We live as neighbors, not as a couple. And Anna, she understands me. She knows what I'm worth." With those words he slammed the lid of the suitcase shut and turned to face her. His face remained cold, but there was a sense of challenge in his words. "I'll calculate the approximate value of everything I've put into this house today, and trust me, you'll stay on the plus side. You'll have a cozy corner, and I'll finally be happy." Those words were the last straw. Maria took a sharp step toward him, her brown eyes blazing with anger. "A cozy corner? Is that what you call the family I've put my soul into all these years? You're abandoning us for some damsel who doesn't even know how to wash a shirt?" Alexander frowned, his composure beginning to crack. "Maria, that's enough. You've always been too emotional. That's why things don't work out between us. I'm leaving, period." Maria stopped, her breathing becoming more frequent. She realized that this conversation wasn't going to change anything anymore. But despite everything, she said with firmness, "You can leave, you can count your investments. But remember one thing, you'll never find what you lose today." Alexander froze for a moment, as if her words had hurt him. But he immediately brushed it off. "Time will tell, Maria. Now be kind and let me pass." He walked out of the house, leaving her standing in an empty room with a suitcase of memories strewn across the floor. After the door closed behind Alexander, Maria slowly sank down onto the couch. She wrapped her arms around her head, feeling the pain of betrayal clutching her heart. Silence reigned in the room, broken only by the quiet ticking of the wall clock. "How could he?" she whispered, wrapping her arms around her knees and trying to calm her hitching breath. Her gaze fell on the photograph on the table. In the picture, she and Alexander stood on their wedding day, both smiling, eyes blazing. At the time, she believed he was hers forever. She took the photograph in her hands, but immediately set it aside, unable to bear it. From outside came the sound of a car pulling up. Maria went to the window and saw Alexander getting into a cab with a suitcase. She watched him, unable to believe that their lives had been so easily overturned in an instant. Left alone, she tried to distract herself by doing chores around the house, but thoughts of what had happened wouldn't let her go. As she was cleaning out her closet, her gaze fell on an old box littered with old letters and papers. Maria decided to pull the box out to distract herself from the pain. She opened it, going through the letters Alexander had written to her when they first started dating. With each line, the memories of past happiness grew sharper. And then she noticed a small black box in the corner. She didn't even remember how it had gotten there. When she opened it, she found a gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant, the gift Alexander had given her on their first anniversary. Inside the pendant was engraved, "To my Maria, forever." Those words brought a new burst of tears to her eyes. Forever, a word that now seemed empty and meaningless to her. But something made her take a closer look at the box. At the bottom was another item, an old piece of paper. It looked like a note someone had written in a hurry. There were only a few words on the paper. "If you find this, it means you still believe." Maria couldn't understand who had written it or why. Her heart squeezed with the feeling as if someone was trying to convey something important to her. But the meaning of the words remained a mystery. She sat holding the leaf and the pendant in her hands as tears flowed down her cheeks. In that moment, she realized that she had to change something in her life. Perhaps it was a chance find, but it made her think, what if there was more than emptiness and pain ahead of her? Maria lit a candle and set it on the table. She decided that this night would be her first step towards a new life. And despite the heaviness in her soul, she felt a spark of hope. Morning brought with it the heaviness of reality. Maria awoke to the bright light shining through the unclosed curtains. The room that had once been a haven for her now seemed cold and empty. On the pillow beside her still lay the indentation of Alexander's head. Her thoughts immediately went back to last night. Remembering the leaf she had found, Maria got out of bed and walked over to the box again. She stared at the note for a long time, trying to figure out where it could have come from. Was it a message from Alexander? Or was it her own forgotten note from the past? Her thoughts were interrupted by the phone ringing. It was Natalia, her friend who had always been there for her in times of need. "Maria, how are you?" Natalia asked, her voice sounding anxious. "Difficult," Maria answered honestly. "He left yesterday. He packed his things and just left." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I knew you had problems, but how are you holding up?" Maria was silent for a long time, trying to find the words. "I don't know, Natasha. I feel like everything I've been building has crumbled. Look, I'll come over. We need to talk," Natalia said firmly. An hour later, Natalia stood at her doorstep with a bag of hot coffee and croissants. Her brightly colored scarf and sunny smile seemed to bring some warmth with it. "You're strong," she said, hugging her friend. "And you'll get through this." They sat down at the kitchen table, and Maria told her everything, about Alexander's words, about the discovery in the box, and about her mixed feelings. "This leaf. It's like it's calling you to do something. Maybe it's a sign," Natalia said thoughtfully, fiddling with her pendant chain. Maria shook her head. "A sign? Nat Ash, I don't even know where it came from. What kind of sign?" But doubt stirred inside her. Maybe Natalia was right? Natalia, as always, had a concrete plan. "Look, the first thing you have to do is to take care of yourself. Let's get you out of this apartment first. Go for a walk, do something. I mean, you've always loved to paint. Why don't you try it again?" "I haven't painted since university," Maria smiled sadly. "All the more reason to start," Natalia cut her off. After she left, Maria sat at the kitchen table, going over her thoughts. Her friend's words made her think, when was the last time she had done something for herself? She went to the closet and pulled out an old drawing album that was dusting on a shelf. Opening it, she saw her old sketches, landscapes, portraits, even a few sketches of Alexander. These drawings reminded her of who she used to be, before she was immersed in the domestic routine. Maria picked up a pencil and began to draw. The lines, tentative at first, gradually became clearer. Time flew by, and soon she was immersed in the process. By evening, she realized that she felt lighter for the first time in a long time. Her drawing of a sunny morning in the park was far from perfect, but there was something alive and real about it. Maria looked at the finished work and thought, maybe this is the beginning of my journey to myself. Something new began to dawn in her soul, a weak but persistent faith that she could find herself and her power. The next day Maria woke up with a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. Her gaze fell on a drawing lying on the table. She ran her fingers over the pencil lines, feeling proud that she was able to find inspiration again, even if it was so tiny. As she made herself coffee, her gaze fell again on the box she'd tossed in the corner yesterday. Something inside her told her that there might be something else in there that she didn't know about. After drinking her coffee and gathering her courage, Maria decided to open the box again. At the very bottom, under a layer of old letters and postcards, she found an envelope with someone else's handwriting. It was signed, "For Maria. When the time comes." Her heart beat faster. She opened the envelope carefully, feeling her hands shaking. Inside was an old photograph of a young man in a military uniform and a woman who looked like herself, but much younger. On the back of the photo was written a short text, "Family is strength, even if it crumbles. You can always build it back up again." Maria clutched the photograph to her chest, feeling tears come to her throat. She remembered her grandmother's stories about her brother, who had disappeared during the war. But what was that photograph doing in a box belonging to Alexander? Was it related to her current problems? Her mind was churning, but there were no answers. A knock on the door brought her out of her musings. Natalia stood on the doorstep with some kind of folder in her hands. "Hi," she said, smiling, but her expression was serious. "I thought about your situation and wanted to help. These are the deeds to your house. I know a good lawyer who can handle it if Alexander starts dividing up the property." Maria froze. She felt grateful and confused at the same time. Her problems suddenly seemed too big, and she seemed too small to handle them. "Thank you, Natasha," she said quietly, hugging her friend. "I don't know what I would do without you." "You're welcome," Natalia replied, adjusting her scarf. "But you must remember that no one can help you if you don't start fighting for yourself. Let's start small. Tell me what's bothering you the most right now." Maria hesitated. She wanted to tell about the photograph, but something kept her from doing so. Perhaps it was the fear of looking crazy. Instead she said, "I just want to understand who I am. My whole life has been built around Alexander, and now I don't know what to do next." Natalia nodded, her face softening. "Let's start simple, then. What brings you joy? Don't think about him, don't think about the past. Just answer that question." Maria hesitated, her gaze sliding around the room. Her hands automatically reached for the sketchbook. "I'm thinking, drawing. I started yesterday, and it really helped." "That's great." Natalia perked up. "Then get on with it. And don't stop. And if you need help, I'm always here for you." After her friend left, Maria opened the album again. Her hands moved confidently across the paper, creating new images. She painted the people she remembered from her childhood, the nature that surrounded her when she was growing up in a small town. Each stroke seemed like therapy, allowing her to find herself again. But the picture from the envelope never left her thoughts. She put it next to her sketchbook to be inspired by it. Her soul began to whisper, perhaps this was the key to something greater than she could imagine. Maria was still holding the photograph in her hands when there was a knock on the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, but she intuitively felt it was Natalia. When she opened the door, she saw not only her friend, but also a tall man with a confident posture. His blue eyes radiated calmness, and his strict suit hinted at professionalism. "Maria, this is Ivan. He's a lawyer and can help you with the documents," Natalia said, taking the initiative at once. Maria was confused at first, but then nodded, inviting the guests inside. Ivan, 40 years old, introduced himself briefly but warmly, which diffused the tension a little. The three of them sat down at the kitchen table, where Natalia immediately pulled out of her bag the documents she had brought earlier. "I took a look at your situation," Ivan began, adjusting his glasses. "And I want to say that you have every chance to defend your rights to the house. If Alexander insists on the division, we can prove that most of the property was acquired jointly by you, so you have equal rights." Maria listened attentively, but inside she still felt doubts. Her life seemed so chaotic that the thought of legal battles frightened her. "But I'm not sure I'm ready for this," she said quietly, lowering her eyes. "Maria," Ivan leaned forward gently, "this isn't just a fight for the house. This is a fight for your independence, for your future. You deserve to live in peace, without fear that someone will take away what is rightfully yours." The lawyer's words awakened something new in Maria. Perhaps it was a spark of hope that she could manage after all. Natalia, noticing this, supported her friend. "We're all here to help you. And you know that I'm always on your side." After they discussed the details of the case, Ivan proposed to start the process by filing for divorce and fixing the rights to the property. Maria agreed, feeling that this step could be the beginning of her new life. Several weeks had passed since Maria had decided to take the first step toward her independence. Her days have been filled with counseling with Ivan, paperwork, and constant support from Natalia. Despite her efforts, however, the weight of memories still haunted her. Every corner of the house reminded her of past years that now seemed alien. Meanwhile, Alexander's life seemed to be on the upswing. He was posting pictures with Anna, glowing at events and showing off the perfect new life. But the truth was quite different. Behind the facade of luxury were cracks that were becoming more and more visible. Anna, 32, young, beautiful, and ambitious, enjoyed Alexander's attention and resources. But her interests were nowhere near as genuine as he had thought. She spent more and more time with her friends, showing little interest in their shared future. Alexander began to notice that she avoided talking about family, plans, and responsibilities. One evening he came home and found Anna having a party with her friends. The apartment was littered with empty glasses and food, the music was blaring, and Anna herself hadn't even noticed his arrival. "What's going on here?" he asked, trying to remain calm. Anna only shrugged her shoulders. "Relaxing, Sash. You don't mind, do you?" Alexander felt anger boiling up inside. He retreated to the bedroom, trying to make sense of what was happening. His new life was beginning to lose the luster it had at first. He realized that Anna didn't see him as a person, to her he was just a source of resources. Meanwhile, Maria was going through her own changes. She found a new job. A small local gallery was looking for an employee who could help with organizing exhibitions. This was a real lifesaver for her, as working surrounded by art reminded her of her long-held dreams. One day, returning home after a successful day of work, Maria noticed a message from Ivan. "Maria, we have good news. The judge has tentatively sided with you. That's a big step forward." Her heart beat faster. It was the first ray of light after a long time of darkness. She realized there was still a lot of work ahead, but this moment was a symbol to her that she had the power to change her life. While Maria was getting her confidence back, Alexander was getting deeper and deeper into trouble. Anna began to demand more money, more gifts, but refused to make any commitments. At some point he caught himself thinking that he missed Maria. Her warmth, her caring, the way she always supported him no matter what. One lonely evening, he happened to open an old folder of their family photos. There was a snapshot from their anniversary, him holding Maria's hand and their son laughing beside him. Alexander felt his soul constrict with bitterness. He began to realize that he had lost something truly precious. Meanwhile, Maria was reveling more and more in her new life. She organized her first exhibition, receiving praise from colleagues and visitors. Her confidence grew, and with it the feeling that she was finally finding her place in the world. One day, on her way home, she happened to bump into Alexander. It was a brief but emotion-filled encounter. He looked tired and depressed, as if life no longer brought him pleasure. He tried to make conversation, but Maria calmly replied, "Alexander, I'm grateful to you for everything we've been through. But now I'm building my life, and I'm not looking back." Those words sounded like a blow to him. He realized that Maria was no longer the woman he had left behind. She was stronger, wiser, and ready for new challenges. Maria returned home with the feeling that she had finally closed the Alexander chapter of her life. Her future now belonged to her alone. Several months had passed since Maria had met Alexander on the street. She no longer felt anger or bitterness towards him. Instead, her heart was filled with a sense of completion. She knew now that life didn't end with betrayal, and sometimes it was just the beginning of something deeper and more important. The trial ended in Maria's favor. She was able to keep her home and get a decent alimony for her son's upbringing. Ivan, her lawyer, announced the news with a slight smile. "You did it, Maria. It was not an easy battle, but you showed how strong you are." Maria, clasping her hands in her lap, looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you, Ivan. It's not only your merit, but mine as well. I finally felt that I could defend myself and my son." Meanwhile, Alexander found himself in a difficult situation. Anna, feeling that he was no longer able to provide for her endless desires, quickly found an alternative. She disappeared from his life as suddenly as she had entered it, leaving Alexander with debts and a broken heart. He tried to contact Maria, calling her several times, but her number remained unavailable to him. One day he even drove to her house, but saw her and her son happily strolling through the garden. It was a different Maria, a woman radiant with confidence and joy. He realized that she was now out of his reach. Maria, meanwhile, continued to build her new life. Her work at the gallery became her true calling. She organized exhibitions, met new people, and even took part in the creation of a major art project. This not only strengthened her professional skills but also gave her inspiration. Maria's son, now a teenager, changed noticeably. He no longer asked about why Dad left or blamed Mom for what had happened. Instead, he looked up to her with respect, as an example of strength and independence. One evening, Maria received an invitation to a big event to celebrate the opening of a new gallery. She spent a long time choosing an outfit, feeling a little excited, just like in the old days. Natalia, as always, was by her side and helped her with the choice of dress. "You look amazing," Natalia said, fixing her hair. "Today is your day, Maria. Don't forget this." There were many people at the event and Maria felt like a fish in water. She greeted the guests, discussed art and enjoyed the party atmosphere. At some point, a man of about 38 approached her, with a sincere smile and interest in his eyes. "Hello, I'm Mikhail. Do you work here?" Maria was a little embarrassed, but answered. "Yes, I organize exhibitions." "And you?" Mikhail said that he was an artist who had come from another city to present his work. Their conversation dragged on for several hours, and for the first time in a long time Maria felt light and sincere interest. She didn't think about the past, about pain or loss, only about how nice it was to talk to someone who shared her passions. Soon they began dating. It was not a passionate, but rather a calm relationship filled with trust and respect. Mikhail accepted her as she was and did not try to change or control her. One evening, walking with him and her son in the park, Maria realized that her life had finally become what she had dreamed of. It wasn't perfect happiness, but it was her happiness, deserved and longed for. Alexander, left alone, finally realized what he had lost. But this realization came too late. Maria no longer looked to the past. She knew that her future belonged only to her and her son. The story ends with a shot of Mary sitting on the veranda of her house, watching her son playing with Michael in the garden. Her face is lit up with a warm smile and her eyes are full of confidence. She is no longer afraid of life and knows that she has everything she needs to be happy.